Hi, today we're going to be making this three-stone ring, which features an oval center stone and some pairs on each shoulder. They're all bezel set, and we've got a split shank band that we'll create to go around that. All right, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is come over here and start a new drawing, a new file. So click there if you haven't already done so, and it will open up with a fresh drawing window. And we can come over to Gems and Gems on Ring. Now Gems on Ring will place a gemstone that's relative or related to the ring size. So if you change our ring size, the gem will move appropriately. So let's click on that. And it will place initially a round stone, but we're going to change this to an oval. So just click the drop down list there and select oval. And the size, let's just drop this down a little bit. We'll actually make this 7mm stone. Now what you'll notice here is that when I adjust the size, any one of these, because they're currently set to proportional, they're all locked. So the width will adjust relative to the length, and also the height will adjust as well. If you've got a stone where you've got the specific measurements, you would want to switch this proportional slider off and enter the specific sizes in here. Okay, I'm not going to do that now, but just so that you know. The next thing we want to do is come down to transforms, and we want this rotated 90 degrees. We want the stone sort of in a east-west direction. So we'll just type in 90, press enter, and you'll see the stone's now rotated. The other thing I'll just check is this girdle distance. The girdle distance is set to 4. It's probably a bit high. The ring's going to be about, and this measurement, by the way, 4mm, is relative to the girdle of the stone, okay, relative to the distance to the top of the finger rail. So our ring's going to be a little under 2mm thick, so let's make this, drop this down a bit. It probably needs to be about 2.4, I would think. And that's it. We can click the check mark to close that tool. So when you're finished with the tool, you need to either exit out if you want to back out of it. If you want to save what you've done, you click the check mark. And one other thing, sorry, I forgot to mention, is the sizing. I'm currently set to Australian sizing or UK sizing, and I'm set to a size P. So try and set it to that for this exercise. Now I'll just click the check mark to close out of that. Now the next thing we want to do is place a bezel here. So if I select the gemstone now, I click on it to select it, and I come to gem settings. I can click the first icon there, which is our bezel. And it's probably best to view this in the front view. So you want to click here in the tabs down here to set the front view, or you can also do it from here. You can double click on the perspective view and then double click on the front view to maximize it. That's one way, but you're better to do it from these tabs at the bottom, so that's a lot easier. And also we want to switch to our wire display mode so we can actually see through this. So if you click this little icon here, these are all the different display modes. You've got wireframe, shaded display modes, and some rendered views. So we'll click on the wireframe mode, and there we can see the bottom of the stone, and we can see where our bezel is ending. And we'll come up to the top section of the bezel, click there, and we want to adjust this thickness. So the top height, we'll make it a little higher, because this is a larger sort of stone. And the thickness, we're going to make this 0.9 of a mil. Just press enter when you've done that. And the next thing we're going to do is adjust the bottom and the bottom bulge. Actually, sorry, no, it's the taper distance. Let's just drop that out. Sorry, drop it down a little bit. And we'll give it a bit of a bulge to make it a bit rounder. You can see how that's rounding out our bezel a bit. We may have to change these settings later, but it's just a starting point. Now the important thing I wanted to mention here is you can see the bezel is cutting into the top of our ring. That needs to be trimmed to the ring rail. Now you can do that through some other mechanisms, but there's a great little function in here which is a slider that says adapt to ring. So when I click that on, it will actually adjust the bottom of the bezel and force it or pull it either up or down to match the ring rail. Okay. And the other thing I might just adjust is the seat. If I zoom in here, you can see the seat is a little bit too deep. So if we come back to our stone seat here, we can adjust the taper of that and bring that in. A little more. And the last thing we might do actually at the bottom is adjust the bottom thickness. It's 0.6. Let's just match what we used at the top, which is 0.9 of a mil. Okay. So that's it for the moment for that. If we need to make an adjustment, we can come back into this tool. We'll just click to the check mark to save out of that. Now we're going to place one of the pear-shaped stones on the shoulder. So we'll come into gems again, and we'll come to gem on ring. And we want to change this from a brilliant cut to a pear shape. I'm not sure what size, but let's say maybe, I don't know, 3mm stone. Maybe a bit small, maybe 4mm. And also we want to look at the rotation. If I come back to my perspective view, you'll see that's facing out that way. We want to rotate it again. So if we come to transforms here and we come out to rotation here, we type in 90 again, you can see that point's facing that side, and we'll rotate it round to the right hand side. So apart from the girdle distance, which will drop down here, have this sitting a bit lower, we can also set this move around. Move around 0 is at the top of our circle, at the top of our ring rail, so we can move it around a little bit. Now that might be a little low. Let's just set the girdle distance up a bit. Maybe something like that. In fact, we do need it up because we probably want it at a similar height to the girdle distance on the other stone, because remember we're going to have a ring band that comes through here, so that's going to kick in at somewhere near 1.8, 1.9 mil high, maybe 2 mil high, and we need some clearance here on this bezel to be able to set the stone. So 2.5 I'll leave it at for the moment, and we may have to rotate it around a bit more, but let's move it just a fraction more for the moment, so we can come back in and change this. I'll leave it at 5.4 for now. So that's it for that step. We can click the check mark. Remember to close out of that tool and save those settings. And what you'll see on the right hand side is we're starting to build up a history tree showing the tools we've used and also the ability to come back in and edit those. So we'll come and select that stone that we just placed, that pear-shaped stone, and we'll come back to our gem settings and come back to our bezel tool. Place another bezel here. Now with this, we'll set the top thickness. Let's make this 0.8 actually. It's a smaller stone. And again, the bottom section, we want a bit of a bulge again to give it that tulip sort of shape. And the bottom thickness, let's match the top, which is 0.8. And the adapter ring will switch that on so that we can get rid of this underside here. And we can straight away see that this is sitting a little bit too tight on that other stone, which is what I thought. What we'll do is just click the check mark or the tick to place that. We'll come back to that gem on ring. It's the previous command we used. And we'll rotate it around a bit further. So that's done under transforms. You click the arrow there and move around. Oops. Too much. Yeah, 5.8 is too much. Let's try 5.5 or something. A little too tight. 5.7. Yeah, that's better. We do want a bit of contact at the base, so let's come back. I'm trying to keep clearance here at the top for setting purposes, because we need to be able to push over and get a tool in to push over to set the stone. I'm just conscious of this in here, so we either have to adjust here the let me save out of this, sorry. We might be better to do it on the bezel on the larger stone. So let's come in and edit that. And under the bottom here, it's the taper distance. Go the other way. Something like that. Maybe a little less, and we'll adjust the other one. So I've set the taper distance to 0.5. Click the check mark to save that. And now we'll select that other bezel that we created, and we'll edit that, and we'll adjust that taper distance on this bezel as well. So it's under the bottom settings, taper distance. Oops, the wrong way. That will do. I'm just trying to maintain some contact with both of these, okay, so that we've got some contact with the metal. Alright, and if we click the check mark or tick symbol, we'll save those settings. And if we come back to our perspective view, if you want, you can have a look at the underside there and see the contact that we're getting, okay, which is what we want. Now, we're not going to have to bother going through all that to create the stone and bezel on the opposite side. What we can do is we'll come back to our front view, and what we're going to do is just draw a box. I'm clicking and holding with my left mouse button to draw a box around these two items, okay. If you don't get it first go, you can start a bit further around, okay, but just make sure that your box that you're drawing is covering both the pear-shaped stone and the bezel. And then we'll come over to Tools, and there's a command here called Mirror, okay, it's on the first line of tools there. Select that, and we want to mirror on the vertical axis, so click that slider there. You can switch off this horizontal mirror, and you can see we've got an exact duplicate, exactly the same position, mirrored from the very center of this drawing grid, okay. So we can click the check mark or the tick symbol to close out of that tool. So now if we come back to our perspective view, you'll see we've got our stones in place. We've probably got them adjusted, and we won't have to change anything there. We just need to finish this off by creating our ring shank. Now if you come under rings, you'll see that there's quite a number of different ways of creating rings and using some default tools in CrossGems. And one of the tools is a split shank. So it's on that third row of icons there. Just click on that, and that will open up the default split shank for us. Now with this tool, you can have this section open. We don't want it open, we want it closed, and we want you know, maybe a different sort of style here. So there are some defaults in here, so maybe we can pick one of these, like this one. This is the one that we'll use, so just click on that and you'll see that will update and change. Now we've got some options in here. Under top we can set the split distance. So the split distance at the moment, this is the distance between here and here. So if we reduce that, it's going to come in on our ring. So we want that to come in fairly tight. We want some good contact there. And the other thing we want to do is set up our top thickness. Top thickness is 2.3. We can probably drop it down a fraction, 2.2. I'll just check that from the front view to make sure it's low enough. Now we'll drop it. We'll make it 2 mil. Let's just make it 2 mil even. And the reason we're doing that is because, again, we want clearance for the, be able to set the bezels on these stones. So when setting these, we need to be able to get into this area and into here. We don't want the band in the way. So we've got a bit of clearance on all those settings there. I'll come back to my perspective viewport. And the other thing we want to do is at the bottom, just check our measurements here. We've got a width of 3.5 mil. Let's make this a bit narrower. Let's make it, say, 2.5 mil. And the bottom thickness, we'll leave it 1.8. 1.8 is what I normally draw. Or 1.8, 1.9, typically for a ring or an engagement ring. And the only other thing I'm looking at here is this distance here. We can probably move that opening up so that we've got it nice and flush with the metal. Okay, so that's the split angle here. It's currently 176. If we reduce that, it's going to move that up. So always just check visually that things look okay. If you find that it's hard to see things in this view, I actually normally draw in the shaded display mode, this display mode here, because I find it just gives you a lot more legibility. You can see exactly what's sort of going on. So I think that looks okay. I'm going to click the check mark or the tick symbol to close out of that tool. And the last thing I'll just quickly go over is if we switch to our rendered display, which is this view here, or we can go to our CrossGems display, which is the default view, you'll see that the bezels are in a different color. Okay, let's go and fix that up. If we hold our shift key down and select all of the bezels, so holding shift while clicking each of the 3 bezels will allow us to come over to this little tab here, CrossGems Materials. And here we can change from white gold, which is currently selected, to maybe, I don't know, 10 carat yellow gold. And we can do the same for the ring. If we click on the ring, you'll see it's currently set just by this shading here at 18 carat yellow gold. We'll change that to 10 carat. And if you want, we can go to our ray trace display mode, which will give us a sort of a rough rendering of that view. In fact, there's a lot of shadows and things going on in there. Let me just switch to our rendered display. And that's it. Now, the great thing with this is that I mentioned before is if we change our gem on ring, let's say, to a different ring size, everything's going to adjust. So it's best to explain this in the front view. And you'll see if I click on here to edit my gem on ring, and let's change this to slightly smaller size, or let's say a larger size, size Q. You'll see it'll take a moment and update. And when I click out of it, it will update, although the mirror didn't, did it? Why is that? Oh, it did now. I'm not sure what happened there, but it did update once I selected the edit tool and went in to edit it again. So look, that's it for that particular exercise. It's something that you can do to get started. If you like, I suggest going through that exercise a few times. Maybe try some different size stones or different shaped stones. Maybe try a different split shank. As I mentioned before, with the split shank, you can have that open or closed, but certainly for this style of design, I think it works much better closed. And don't forget to save your work. So click up here to save your file, and you need to give it a name and save it to a file somewhere, a folder, either in your downloads folder or a folder that you've got for your drawing work. Alright, bye for now.